It was a quiet moment in a little-known 2014 interview that many fans never saw. The program aired on a regional station, received little attention, and disappeared without much discussion. During the conversation, Guy Penrod was asked about his decision to leave the Gaither Vocal Band. Instead of offering the kind of answer people expected, he paused for several seconds before speaking. The silence itself seemed meaningful. Then he simply said, "My family needed me to come home." Those words sounded uncomplicated, almost ordinary, yet they carried a depth that only became clear over the years. Most people assumed his departure was about pursuing a solo career or seeking a different musical direction. While those things eventually happened, they were never the true reason behind his decision. As Guy gradually opened up through interviews over the following decade, a much richer and more personal story emerged. It was not merely about changing careers, but about responding to what he believed was God's calling for a different season of life. His wife, Angie, would later reinforce that understanding by describing the transition as one of restoration rather than sacrifice. Guy Penrod's journey into the hearts of gospel music fans happened slowly and authentically. Unlike artists who become famous overnight through chart-topping hits, Guy earned the affection of audiences through years of faithful ministry. Millions first encountered him through Gaither homecoming videos that became treasured traditions in churches and living rooms across America. Families gathered to watch those performances, finding encouragement and worship in music that felt genuine and timeless. When Guy joined the Gaither Vocal Band in 1994, the group already enjoyed tremendous respect in gospel music, yet few could have predicted just how central he would become to its identity over the next 17 years. His powerful baritone voice immediately stood apart. It possessed remarkable strength while remaining warm and inviting. Whether singing soaring solos or blending with the group's harmonies, Guy conveyed sincerity that listeners instinctively trusted. Fans often describe his performances as deeply moving because they sensed that every lyric reflected his own convictions. Those who worked alongside him repeatedly observed that there was no difference between the man on stage and the man away from it. His faith was genuine, his humility consistent, and his character steady. That authenticity had deep roots. Raised in Abilene, Texas, Guy grew up in a family where faith shaped everyday life. His grandfather served as a preacher, and the values of Scripture were woven naturally into the rhythm of home. Music was never simply entertainment. It was a means of worship and encouragement. Long before professional training refined his voice, church services, family gatherings, and personal devotion had shaped the foundation of his life. Later, while attending Oral Roberts University, he developed his musical abilities, but the core of who he was had already been established. Bill Gaither did not discover an unfinished artist needing direction. He recognized a mature Christian whose gifts were ready for a larger platform. Throughout nearly 2 decades with the Gaither Vocal Band, Guy performed alongside some of the finest voices in gospel music, including David Phelps, Mark Lowry, Michael English, Russ Taff, Wes Hampton, and others. The lineup changed over time, but Guy remained a dependable presence. His consistency reassured audiences and strengthened the group. Bill Gaither trusted him completely, and fans came to associate his voice with the golden era of the homecoming ministry. From the outside, everything appeared ideal. Concerts filled arenas, recordings sold in remarkable numbers, and the ministry continued touching lives across generations. Behind the scenes, however, another reality quietly unfolded. While Guy traveled extensively, his wife Angie remained at home, raising their 8 children. The demands of touring during those years were enormous. Homecoming events were not occasional weekend appearances. They involved extensive travel, recording sessions, television productions, rehearsals, and long stretches away from home. Every successful concert required time that could not be spent elsewhere. Angie carried the daily responsibilities of family life with grace, managing school schedules, household needs, celebrations, disappointments, and countless ordinary moments that define childhood. Over the years, she has spoken about that season without resentment, but with honesty. Raising 8 children while a husband spends much of the year traveling requires extraordinary commitment. Guy understood the weight she carried. Although he rarely discussed his personal struggles publicly, those closest to him knew he increasingly wrestled with competing responsibilities. Every concert meant another missed birthday, school event, or evening around the dinner table. These were not dramatic crises that made headlines. They were the quiet sacrifices that accumulate over years until they demand careful reflection. Looking back now, subtle signs appear in interviews from those years. Whenever Guy spoke about his children, there was unmistakable affection mixed with longing. Even on stage, attentive viewers sometimes noticed moments of reflection behind his smile. He loved the ministry deeply, but he also loved his family. Those loves eventually collided in a way that required difficult choices. When Guy announced his departure in 2013, the transition unfolded with remarkable grace. Bill Gaither publicly expressed appreciation for Guy's years of faithful service, while Guy spoke warmly of the ministry that had shaped so much of his life. There was no scandal, disagreement, or bitterness. Fans naturally assumed he was simply beginning the next phase of his career as a solo artist. That assumption contained part of the truth, but not its deepest layer. In later interviews, Guy explained that his understanding of ministry had changed. He increasingly believed that his first calling was not standing before thousands of people singing about faith, but living faithfully within his own home. He spoke openly about realizing that he often gave his strongest hours to audiences who already knew the Lord, while offering whatever remained to his wife and children. That realization unsettled him. It was not an accusation against the Gaither ministry, nor a criticism of gospel music. Instead, it reflected a deeply personal conviction that God was redirecting his priorities. His explanation resonated with many believers because it reflected a familiar biblical principle. Seasons of life change, and faithful obedience sometimes requires leaving something good in order to embrace something better. God may call someone to public ministry during one chapter and to quiet family investment during another. Such transitions are rarely easy because outward success often encourages people to remain exactly where they are. Yet Guy believed that obedience meant recognizing when the season had changed. Walking away required tremendous courage. He was not declining in popularity. He remained one of the most beloved figures in gospel music, and his voice was considered indispensable to the Gaither Vocal Band. Few artists voluntarily leave such influential positions while still at the height of their abilities. Yet Guy chose to do exactly that because he believed his greatest responsibility lay elsewhere. His departure did not signal retirement from music. Instead, it marked the beginning of a solo ministry that reflected his personal convictions more directly. His debut solo album, released in 2014, introduced audiences to music carrying an even greater sense of intimacy. Listeners noticed that his performances possessed fresh, emotional depth. The familiar power of his voice remained, but there was also an unmistakable peace. Rather than sounding like someone striving to prove himself, he sounded like someone completely settled in his purpose. Fans who worried that leaving the Gaither platform might diminish his ministry quickly discovered the opposite. His solo recordings revealed a man singing from experience rather than expectation. The lyrics felt increasingly personal, reflecting lessons learned through difficult decisions and faithful obedience. Many listeners described sensing a new freedom in his music, as though the burdens he once carried had gradually lifted. Angie later described those years as a period of restoration. Instead of focusing on what the family lost by stepping away from constant touring, she emphasized what they regained. Their children experienced a father who was present more consistently during important moments. Ordinary family life became possible again. Meals together, conversations, celebrations, and shared routines replaced many of the long absences that had once defined their schedule. As their children reached adulthood, they occasionally spoke about their appreciation for having their father home. These reflections confirmed that Guy's decision had lasting significance far beyond his professional career. The greatest audience he ever served became the people gathered around his own dinner table. His story also raises important questions about ministry itself. Gospel music has blessed countless lives, but those who dedicate themselves to it often pay hidden personal costs. Endless travel, demanding schedules, and constant public expectations can place extraordinary pressure on marriages and families. Guy never criticized the ministry he loved. Instead, his honesty gently reminded audiences that singers and musicians remain husbands, wives, parents, and ordinary people whose families require their presence just as much as anyone else's. Bill Gaither's response demonstrated remarkable character as well. Rather than viewing Guy's departure as personal rejection, he recognized and respected the decision. Friends and colleagues have consistently described their relationship as one of enduring mutual respect. Guy continued participating in homecoming events from time to time, and his music remained part of the Gaither ministry. Their friendship survived because it rested on shared faith rather than professional necessity. One reunion appearance captured that relationship beautifully. As Bill welcomed Guy back to the stage, observers noticed genuine affection between the two men. It was more than professional courtesy. It reflected years of shared ministry, mutual admiration, and understanding. Their ability to remain close after such a significant transition testified to the values both men had spent decades singing about. Today, Guy Penrod continues recording and performing, but with a life shaped by different priorities. His voice retains its remarkable strength while carrying the maturity that only years of experience can produce. Age has added emotional richness to his performances, allowing listeners to hear not merely technical excellence, but the wisdom of someone who has lived what he sings. Those closest to him often suggest that he has no regrets about leaving the Gaither Vocal Band. Looking at his life today, that seems believable. His family has grown, his children have reached adulthood, and his marriage remains strong. Professionally, he continues enjoying the respect of gospel audiences while maintaining the balance he once longed for. Perhaps the most revealing statement Guy ever made was that he hoped to be remembered not primarily as a great singer, but as a good father. For someone blessed with extraordinary musical talent, that priority speaks volumes. It reminds us that success is measured differently when viewed through the lens of faith. Public recognition eventually fades, but relationships built through faithful presence endure for generations. His story challenges everyone to consider what truly deserves their best energy. Careers matter, accomplishments matter, and ministries matter. But families also deserve our strongest hours, rather than whatever remains after every other commitment has been satisfied. Guy Penrod's life illustrates that choosing differently does not necessarily mean losing something valuable. Sometimes it means discovering what was most valuable all along. The music that first introduced millions to Guy Penrod continues inspiring listeners around the world, whether through classic Gaither homecoming recordings or his solo albums. Yet perhaps his greatest legacy extends beyond any recording or performance. It lies in demonstrating that faithfulness sometimes requires stepping away from applause in order to fulfill quieter responsibilities that few people ever witness. By choosing presence over prestige, he showed that obedience is not always dramatic. Often it looks like coming home, keeping promises made in private, and trusting that the most meaningful ministry may begin with the people who know you best. That example continues encouraging audiences just as powerfully as the songs that first made them love his voice.